Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Brandon Cobb, co-founder of HBG Capital. I've got Logan Freeman on the show today. We've been part of the same mastermind groups. He's a good friend. He is doing some really cool stuff. He's been in real estate for over 8 years now. He's executed over 300 million in acquisitions for his firm, FTW Investments. He's head of acquisitions for a prior investment fund. So he's got tons of acquisition experience. We're going to talk about that today. Logan is also the managing broker at Exchange CRE. This is a boutique commercial real estate brokerage that specializes in 1031 exchanges. I want to talk about that again today. So he leverages his unique blend of people skills and transactional expertise. Logan is a driving force in acquisitions, capital raising, investor relations, and serves as a voting member of the firm's investment committee. Logan, welcome to the show.
Man, Brandon, thank you for having me. I've been following the show, following the success, all of it. We've been connected for quite some time now, and just recently started talking about some of the same type of development opportunities. So it is my pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, man. And let me just highlight we're not too far apart in age, I don't think. I think we're kind of around the same age. And you have
Yeah.
experienced a tremendous amount of success at your age. I mean, over 300 million in acquisitions at your firm. That is extremely impressive. I want to talk about how you did that. But
Yeah.
before we jump into the nitty-gritty, for those that don't know you, what's your story?
Man, my story can take up a whole podcast, but here's how I'll put it. I'm from a smaller town, the capital of Missouri, which many people don't know. It's Jefferson City, Missouri. All right. I grew up, money was definitely not something we talked about. My mom did not understand money, and my dad knew how to spend it on the wrong things. All right. And so I'm a larger individual. God bless me with some stature and some height and a strong back. So when I was 14 years old, I decided I was going to go find a job and start making money because that's what my mom did. I watched her work two jobs my whole life growing up to put food on the table, to make sure that we could go to private Catholic schools, all of that stuff. She worked extremely hard. So I thought that was the end goal, right? Go work, go work, go work. So minimum wage back in, oh gosh, when was this? 2004. All right. 2004 was $5.15. And so I found a job at a catering business doing dishes, cleaning floors, you name it, just doing whatever they needed to do. And then one of my football buddies was like, "Hey, I've got a farm. My family's got a farm. We harvest hay, and we need people to come put hay on the back of a trailer." I said, "Well, I'm gonna do that as well." And so I started throwing hay when I was 15 years old, 16 years old, and learned how to work hard. But I would say my mom was by far the biggest influence on me in regards to that whole paradigm shift. And then so I was able to play college football at the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg, and I really kind of grew up, I think, in that period of time because I wanted to take my academic studies, really seriously. It was like I got a scholarship. I need to make sure that I make the best use of this time, and so had a quite successful collegiate football career. Was able to get picked up as an undrafted free agent with the Oakland Raiders. Was ultimately cut from the Oakland Raiders and went back to school to finish my master's program. And I always say there's these big turning pages or big light bulb moments in your life or turning points, right? And this was one of them because no longer was I an athlete. I'm 24 years old, 23, 24 years old, going back to school. At the NFL Combine, I was 335 pounds. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to be a big boy anymore. So I lost 120 pounds in 6 months and I got a job. I got a job because I needed to pay for school. So I would work I get up, I think it was 3:30 a.m., hit the gym at 4, work out, get back to my apartment, my roach infested apartment in Warrensburg, Missouri. I still drive by that every once in a while. And then I would drive an hour to Sweet Springs, Missouri, make 265 cold calls, and then I would drive back to Warrensburg, and I would basically go to school all night, and I'd spend 8 to 12 hours on Saturday catching up on all the schoolwork. And one thing happened to me in that when you go through a physical transformation like that, like I don't know how to explain it. If you have never been through this, but something changes in you. Your identity changes, but you also start to see that like the work that you're doing actually can make results because it's your body, it's your health, right? And you can see the tangible results of that. That got me really motivated. And I had some great mentors in my life at this time. And so this was, way back when, before podcasts, really. I mean, I was listening to John Lee Dumas and Lewis Howes on podcasts. So The Entrepreneur on Fire and The School of Greatness. Those are really the only two podcasts that I could find back in the day. But I was also listening to Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, Tom Hopkins, you name it. I was listening. If I could get my hands on those CDs, I was putting them in my Nissan Maxima that was barely trickling down the road, and I was listening to that stuff for an hour there and an hour back. And alongside the physical transformation was a big mental transformation. And that's really what got me thinking about business, making money, and investing. And I said, you know what? I'm in my master's program. I'm not really learning much about business per se. Like I still to this day get out of this master's program and say, but how do you actually go make money, right? And like,
Yeah.
because I'm learning statistical regression analysis, and I'm learning, how to do chart of accounts and things like that. It's like, I'm never going to do this in the real world. How do I go generate revenue? And so I obviously, I was attracted to the marketing and the sales component of the MBA program, but I was learning from books like Rich Dad Poor Dad and all these other real estate books that I was reading or listening to, and I was listening to this Entrepreneurs on Fire podcast, and it just got a lot of things kind of moving in the right direction for me. So end up finishing up my master's program. I left that job, had already a new job lined up as the youngest franchise consultant that Jimmy John's had ever hired. And so I was going to move to Kansas City, and I was going to have 25 stores across Northwest Arkansas and Altoona in Des Moines, Iowa, and then in Kansas and Missouri. And my job was to keep the brand consistent. Well, I was getting ready to move out of that roach-infested apartment and go back home for a little bit before I started my job, whatever it was, finish my master's program in the school in the summertime. And I remember my dad came up to Warrensburg because he had a truck at the time to help me move out. And my dad is 6'3", dunk a basketball, hit a golf ball 300 yards, he full Native American, just a great athlete. And he couldn't walk up the stairs, and I said, yeah, I know something's wrong. And my dad had struggled with drugs and alcohol addiction his whole life. But this time was different, man. I knew something was going on. Well, 2 weeks later, my dad died. And he died of a liver cirrhosis and a stroke and all these different complications. And so if you can imagine, I'm no longer an athlete. I'm getting ready to start a new job. I lost 120 pounds. I'm going through this physical and mental transformation. Then my dad dies. And I'm like, whoa, man, the universe or God is telling me something here. And I picked up Robert Frost, and it was like you got two choices, right? You could go down the path less traveled or the one that everybody else takes. And I said it would be really easy for me to go down the same path that my father and my uncles have done. I've got 2 or 3 uncles that have also died of alcoholism and liver cirrhosis. And I had, by the grace of God, I had some mentors and some people pull me up and say, hey, it's time to get back into your faith. It's time to make the right decisions, and pointed me in the right direction. And so I went off to Jimmy John's school and was there for about a year. They ranked all of their business coaches and their consultants, and I was up at the top echelon. And I said, hey, boss man, what's my move? Like, what's the next move? And he's like, dude, you're the youngest student in the company. You're going to have to put in your time. And I said, well, here's my 2 weeks notice, and I'm going to figure out something else. So I left there, joined a startup company in a completely different industry, transportation industry. I actually spent some time down in Nashville going to Western Express, right down in Nashville. So, but we sold a product that would go on over the road trucks. And I had a great time at that company, was there for about 2.5 years, met the best man at my wedding, met my wife through that. It was just phenomenal. But I decided to leave and go take my first 6-figure sales job at a larger company. And 15 months into that, a private equity company comes in and buys it, and they let off all of the salespeople. And so I am now unemployed. And my wife had just started a new job. This is before our 3 children that we have now. But she said, look, I'm going to support you with what you want to do. and I wasn't sold on just doing real estate. So I started a sales consulting company. I was making cold calls, setting up CRM systems, flying to Orlando, Florida, pitching people's products, you name it. I would do it as long as you'd pay me $250 an hour, because you remember I was getting paid $5.15 for scrubbing, chicken blood off of pans in Jefferson City, Missouri at Donita's Cakes and Catering when I was 14 years old. So
Uh,
you're going to pay me $250 to make a cold call? Yeah, let's do that. So, but at the same time, my buddy had just lost his acquisitions manager, and he had just landed a $50 million fund buying single family homes in Kansas City. And he's like, hey, I need somebody to come in and do 150, 200 transactions over the next 12 to 15 months. I said, well, I'm your guy. So I went and got licensed, started doing 12 transactions a month, still have 3 full-time sales consulting clients paying me. 6 months in, my wife is like, you know what? Wow. Like you took a lot of action, but you need to focus. And all you do is complain about this sales consulting. So I ended up dissolving that company and going all in on the real estate side. And I was really interested at the time how this fund had raised the capital. And they said, well, we syndicated the equity. I said, you synd a what? Like you got a
yeah.
syndicated radio show? What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about here? And so I, went and read a bunch of books, went to some conferences, and figured out that was the model that I wanted to focus on, but not on single family homes. I wanted to do it on multifamily and commercial. And so ended up moving my license to a commercial brokerage, focusing on 1031 exchange buyers, had a lot of success, put some money in my pocket, found some business partners. And this is about 2019, found some business partners, and we're going all in on neighborhood retail shopping centers. And then March of, 2020 happens. So I think we had $25-35 million worth of shopping centers under contract going into COVID.
Oh
And we
my
said,
God.
what are we going to do? Well, people need places to live. And so we started to look at apartments. And it was this really interesting period of time where the Green Street Property Price Index was troughing. So asset prices were going down. But at the same time, there was a window where the Fed basically made the federal funds rate negative. And so there was this nice little window where we went and we executed close to 1,500 units of multifamily, and we are still managing some of those assets. We've sold some of those assets, but in the meantime, we've picked up another 600,000 square foot of commercial space. So this is neighborhood retail shopping centers, industrial building, and this 40,000 square foot office building that I'm sitting in right now. And we've been pretty quiet the last 15 to 18 months. It's been a little bit difficult to buy cash flowing assets.
Yeah.
And so where we focused right now is getting properties ready to dispose of, coming into what I think is going to be another boom of transactions and asset prices, and happy to talk about that. And then really getting the commercial real estate brokerage that we started kind of up and going and getting ready for capturing some market share over the next 2 to 3 years. So that's kind of what I'm focused on now. And I've also, like I mentioned, had 3 children in the meantime, and that keeps me plenty busy as well.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. So I got to go back to something you said. I don't want to interrupt your story. 120 pounds in 6 months.
Yeah.
That's almost a pound a day. You got about 180 days in a 6-month period. So that's like 3/4 or more of a pound a day. There's 3,500 calories in a pound of fat or a pound of whatever. What in the world? Talk to us about that. How did you
Yeah.
do that? I know you lost weight. I've seen the photos on LinkedIn, the before and
Sure.
after, and your mental transformation and stuff like that. But I did not know it was 120 pounds in 6 months.
Yeah, I went from 335 to 214 pounds. And how I did it was with brute force, discipline, and focus. And I'm not saying that is, and I didn't probably do it the healthiest way, and I wouldn't recommend everybody doing that. But I knew that I had a period of time where I could really be selfish. And I think selfishness gets a bad rap. But if you're going through something like I was going through, getting cut from the NFL, no longer playing football, dad passes away, trying to get a new job started, like I needed to be selfish. And so part of what I did was I just spent time figuring out, and I read, 5-6 books on diets and nutrition and workout plans, but I was in a massive caloric deficit and passed out many times while working out. I had this gauntlet, is what I called it. And it would be 105 degrees out in the Missouri heat, and it's humid here. I would go out, and all I had eaten was tuna packets and hard boiled eggs all day. And I'd go out and I'd work out for an hour and a half and go through this gauntlet that I'm not sure many people on the CrossFit train would be able to go through. So, anyways, that's how I did it. I got the weight off. I've been able to stay somewhere around 230 to 250 ever since. I had a little bit of a peak there when I was having babies and all of that, but I'm down to, back down to about 235 pounds and staying pretty consistent there. Much more healthy lifestyle than I did to get that weight off.
Okay. All right. That's absolutely wild. That's just a testament that if you set your mind to something, anything is possible. So if you're listening and you're struggling to lose like 10, 15 pounds, you just heard Logan's story. No excuses. Go out there and lose the weight. You can do it. Yeah. All right. You mentioned that there was a short period where a Fed funds rate was almost negative and y'all bought 1,600 units in that time period. You did a little bit of a pivot. You are focused on office, I think retail strip centers, what you said.
Mostly industrial.
COVID was coming. That was 2009. You're like, oh, crap. Not sure if this asset class is going to work out. Pivoted over to multifamily. And obviously that you've had a lot of success there. I mean, that's a lot of units to acquire over a pretty short period of time. What did the partnerships look like there? Did y'all have like family office partnerships? What did the retail accredited investor, capital raising look like there? I'm just trying to give people a picture of like how you did that. Cause again, like the weight loss, that is a tremendous amount of progress in a very short period of time.
Yeah. With no background and no track record of doing it. That might have been the probably the most difficult component of that. So I would say we did every we took every avenue possible. Podcast had a lot to do with it. Podcast with me speaking, going on different podcasts, created a lot of opportunities for me to make relationships with people in Silicon Valley, and was able to go speak at Google, Amazon, eBay, and Apple's world headquarters. And I found out that they had these internal interest groups that were focused on real estate. Well, my pitch was, you guys live in a money state. I live in a deal state. Let's be the pipeline from the money state to the deal state, because many of these folks didn't know where Kansas City was, didn't know what anything, that was just a flyover state from when they're going from, California to New York or somewhere else, right? So I had to educate a lot about Kansas City and where we are and why to invest in the Midwest. I started calling it the Silicon Prairie. There's a lot of startups here, right? So trying to build those relationships, and was very successful at building some pretty strategic relationships at the time that had major capital raising abilities to help us with that. But that didn't solve the whole issue. We were doing Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae loans. And so we needed to solve for the key principles and someone that had already had some experience dealing with that type of lending. And so one of my business partners at his previous firm at a family office had helped a group grow from 500 units to 5,700 units. And so we leveraged that group's management and their experience and brought them in on a number of those transactions to help us to be able to get the capital or the loans and the property management that we needed at the time.
Wow. So you figured out how to go and speak at some of the biggest tech firms, most prestigious tech firms to get the word. How did you do that? How did you get a speaking engagement with Google or any of the other big name brands that you just named?
Yeah. So I think it was two things. One, a podcast with Michael Blank like 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. It went viral. It was me talking about 1031 exchanges, about Kansas City, and it was before anybody was really doing that. Michael's got a pretty big following. A lot of those people in the tech industry thinking that they want to get into real estate. And I said, look, on the podcast, I said, hey, I know people want real estate exposure, but you trying to be a syndicator on the side, you need to stop. You need to focus on what you're good at and partner with people, because you guys, your sphere of influence is capital, it's tech, it's understanding that. Take that capital and put it into real estate with operators who know what they're doing, right? That was number one. Number two was I was able, through a lot of my clientele that were looking to do 1031 exchanges from California into Kansas City, we had successful 1031 exchanges. So I get a call and say, hey, I don't really have a 1031 going on, but man, this deal in Kansas City is really crushing it. Do you guys have anything else? And they start to say, well, I've got a group of investors that I would like to put together. And I said, well, look, why don't we do this together and I'll go source the deals, right? So it was a lot of those conversations and those relationships that I was able to kind of infiltrate. And then the one at Intel was a good friend of mine, Daniel Homlin. I mean, he was running the interest group there. And then once one of them, found me on a podcast and somebody else listened to it over at Amazon and he became a passive investor. And he's like, hey, if you're going to be out in town, I'll organize an event for you. I said, okay. So within a week's time, we had 5 or 6 of these meetings that we would just go there, educate about Kansas City, talk about real estate, and we were able to develop a lot of relationships out of that.
Man, that is so cool. So it sounded like your experience as a broker
Yes.
specializing in these 1031 exchanges, you were doing that initially. So you're brokering all these transactions. And for those listening who don't know what a 1031 is, you basically sell the real estate. And instead of paying the capital gains, as long as you roll into another real estate deal, you can postpone that. It helps you
Yes.
snowball faster and not get hit with the taxes along the way. You were able to have a pretty large network, I guess. And so you were able to leverage your existing network to really say, hey, I'm brokering your deals. We have a relationship. Let's go and say, what if I brought a deal? Would you want to invest in that deal? And basically, use the 1031 exchange or whatever it is. And so you had access right there.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. They said, well, outside of the 1031 exchange, how do these deals get structured? And so then I would start educating about, the private equity model and syndications and passive
Mm.
investors versus, active investors. And some of them even became, general partners with us on deals, and they exited out of their tech companies and, decided to go, start raising funds and being fund managers out of that. And so I helped probably 3 or 4 of those individuals retire from their tech, jobs and, utilize their sphere of influence and go start doing their own deals, which I always think was a pretty cool, progression for them.
Yeah, that is cool. We were talking about the dirty little secret about syndications and multifamily before here, which is when you get in this space, people think you're just going to make a ton of money, right? And then they get into it and they realize that you don't make a ton of money until that asset sells, and that could be a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 year turnaround.
Yeah.
That little stint that we had in the early 2020s, from like 2020 to 2022, where assets were just selling like hotcakes after COVID kind of whirlwind around, and you're hitting your equity multiples in a year or two, if not less time. That was pretty crazy. That was not a normal time period.
Right.
But a lot of people don't realize that you got to kind of have some kind of revenue coming in, because you're not making a ton of money off the asset management fees or your acquisition fees. It's really when that asset sells. And so you got to have something coming in the meantime to keep the lights on. I know that for you, your brokerage business it plays a very big role in that. And you guys are still focused on the 1031 transactions. I know transaction volume is down, but you've started a mastermind helping other brokerages and agents grow their business because you've had so much success in the past with that. Tell us about the mastermind, and what are some of the unique things that you've been able to do in your brokerage business to differentiate? Because I want to highlight that the brokerage business is extremely difficult to differentiate in. It is
Yes.
for the most part, it's like a copy and paste business. It is very difficult to make it as an agent or a broker, just because it's so difficult to break into a lot of those existing markets where the current brokers who've been there for 20, 30 years, they have all the relationships,
Mhm.
they're getting the business. And so in order to do that, you really have to have a compelling value proposition other than I'm cheaper than them.
Yes.
Because if you're in the commodity based business, you're going to lose. It's a race to the bottom. So how have you been able to differentiate and experience success?
There's a reason that 75% of all agents fail within the first year. 87% of them fail within the first 3 years. Since the NAR settlement, 100,000 agents have left the industry. The Pareto's principle is definitely at work in the commercial real estate broker and the residential real estate business, meaning 20% of those agents are doing 80% of those transactions. And so there's a reason behind that. And there's a couple things that I'd like to kind of point out. Number one is that there is a transformation of commercial real estate transactions happening. And I'm not talking about cryptocurrency or Bitcoins or blockchain or anything. I think that's going to have an impact. But I remember a couple of years ago, people saying, oh my gosh, people are going to start selling all of their real estate deals, fractional real estate and blockchain. And you know what? I haven't seen or heard any of that really coming to fruition. Maybe it has, maybe it's coming into work. What I'm talking about is the the typical commercial real estate broker is between 55 and 60 years old, and they have been doing it for quite some time, and those are the top producers. Those people are starting to phase out of the industry, and who's coming in is a new group of individuals that are wanting to leverage technology. They're wanting to leverage social media and digital marketing and advertising, and they're wanting to think about the business in a different way. And that is having a big effect in regards to how transactions are being done. There's no longer, we're moving from, or we have moved from information parity, where the commercial real estate broker used to have all the information. They had the sales comps, they had the market data, they had all of that. And we've moved to, that would be information asymmetry. We have moved to information parity, which allows a buyer, a client, an investor to have almost the same exact access that a commercial real estate agent has. So how do you differentiate yourself? Well, 6-7 years ago, I decided to start getting active on LinkedIn and on the podcast circuit. And 4 years ago, Yona Weiss invited me to the Commercial Real Estate Challenge on LinkedIn, which is just a post on LinkedIn for 10 days straight, right? Well, I just, you have listened to my background. I just never stopped. And that I just never stopped. I posted every single day, almost every single day, for almost 5 years straight now. Okay, what has that done? Well, I don't remember how many followers and connections I had back in the day, probably 2,000 or 3,000. Well, that has generated now over 25,000 new connections and followers on LinkedIn, about 1.5 million impressions on my content every 6 months, so about 3 million impressions every single year. It has allowed for brand awareness, that I have branded myself as the Kansas City commercial real estate guy, and just Mr. Kansas City. I just on a whim put that in my LinkedIn, and people have started to reach out. And so then I started to think, okay, how do you take someone off of LinkedIn and build a relationship with them? Well, you got to slide into the DMs. You got to have actionable content. But I started to put together funnels for the solving the pain points that I was hearing from these investors that were interested in Kansas City on a regular basis, because I had to value my time, because I was getting on calls 30, 45 minutes just talking about the areas, right? And so I put together a free educational resource, 7 emails with a 50-page ebook that basically documents and educates people on the market. It gives them referrals on people that they can work with here. It talks about the submarkets in Kansas City. It talks about the team that you need to put in place. And at the end of that, you get a 50-page ebook that helps you do your first deal. Now, if you're interested in investing in Kansas City, I did this for 2 reasons. 1, my time, but 2, if you're interested in investing in Kansas City and you've gone through that program, who are you going to call? You're going to call Exchange Commercial Real Estate. You're going to call FTW Investments, right? Because you're interested in that market. And so I think there's ways now that people are not utilizing, because I've heard so many folks say, well, how do you build a brand, in the commercial real estate space? How do you build a book of business? Well, it's relationship driven. Yes, it absolutely is. But let me tell you a little story. I posted on LinkedIn about the Kansas City market, where I thought we were in the market cycle, all these things, about 3 weeks ago. Okay. Individual that DMs me, says, okay, I'm selling a deal in South Dakota. I got $20 million for a 1031 exchange. I'm getting out of a value add deal. I want something a little more stabilized, newer vintage. I said, okay, let me do some work for you. I made 4 or 5 calls, found a $20+ million off market transaction, build for rent in a good market that's growing, and brought that deal to them. Now, that deal did not work because they wanted to be closer to Kansas City. However, out of those 3 or 4 calls that I made, I said, man, I was just with so-and-so that said something. So I called him, and he's like, man, I've got another client in a 1031 exchange. He's doing the financing for the project. He said, let me get this in front of him. And this week we're submitting an LOI for $20+ million on a real estate deal, which will generate close to $400,000 in GCI if it is consummated. So the way that I think people differentiate themselves right now is knowing your market, knowing your numbers. If you're in multifamily, how many units are you tracking? What's the occupancy? What's the average per square foot rents? What's the supply pipeline coming on? Make content around that. That's number one. Number two, the market itself, where the new development's going on. Kansas City, Missouri just passed some laws that makes it a lot more tenant friendly than landlord friendly. How's that going to impact, right? You need to know that stuff. Number three, evergreen content. What's a 1031 exchange? What team do I need to put in place to do my first deal? Hey, if I've already done 5 deals, how do I get ready for a disposition? That's evergreen content that never goes away, that you can have on a repository. And so I'm always generating that type of content and making sure that I'm getting in front of my target audience, right? Ideal customer profiles. And if I'm able to do that successfully as a commercial real estate broker, I move from being in the real estate business into the lead generation business and marketing business, and then figuring out how to monetize those different transactions in those different ways. I call it manufacturing opportunity out of thin air. It's kind of like it's what the brilliance is called. You take one piece of information, you make some inferences of it, you bring them together, and then you manufacture opportunity through that. That, to me, is how you differentiate yourself. If you're going to go work for CBRE, if you're going to go work for a large brokerage firm, I can't tell you how to differentiate yourself necessarily. If you're willing to kind of put yourself out there, try to build your own brand, and really dominate a specific niche within a market, this is the strategy to do so. And I've been successful enough of this that I've had an agent or two of mine leave and start their own brokerages because of this mentality and this whole process. And so I think that's number one. Number two is leveraging technology. Whenever I go to underwrite a deal now, I don't pull it up on Excel. Excuse me. I use Intel CRE, which is an AI generated underwriting software tool that allows me to get an underwriting done with multiple scenarios in less than 30 minutes. I can upload the rent rolls. I can upload the T12s. It maps it to the right market, to the right segments. It puts it in the right places. I'm no longer reading that. I now know the loss to lease. I now know where the market rents is. What's the gap? What's the opportunity? All of that. I can do multiple debt scenarios, all of that. Now, that's done. Now I can actually create a link that shares multiple scenarios to that client. And in less than 60 minutes, I've taken a deal that we maybe talked about, on a phone call. I've underwritten it with multiple scenarios, and I've sent it back through a link that has already generated all of the information that they would need to be able to make an informed decision, right? So that's another piece of the component, is leveraging that technology. But you still can't get away from needing to know your market extremely well, needing to know how to actually transact real estate. And I think the other piece that really sets me apart is I read Bo Beery's book, Multifamily Investors Who Dominated, really early on in my career. And he wrote that for multifamily investors, not brokers. But that got me into the mentality of what investors and owners are thinking about. And then as I became an owner and investor myself, now I'm having a conversation with a property owner from a principal to an owner standpoint. It's no longer, let me just sell your real estate. It is, hey, would you like to have a property performance audit done on that property? When's the last time you audited the performance of your portfolio? Well, I don't do that on a regular basis. Okay. Well, I'm not going to use broker opinion of value because that sounds like every other broker. But if I come in and say, hey, I'm going to do a property performance audit on a specific deal for you and give you some recommendations, now I'm adding value, right? So there's different components like that. So brand awareness, knowing your market, and then actually adding value and not sounding like everyone else are three things that have really helped me continue to be able to do transactions and set myself apart in this market.
Let's just recap everything that you said, because there were so many gold nuggets in there. One, you said that 6-7 years ago, you got involved in LinkedIn. CRE Challenge, Yona Weiss did the challenge, posted every day for 10 days straight. And you said you just never stopped.
That's
You
right.
picked your market, you picked your niche, you knew who your target avatar was, your customer, and you started creating content every single day, nonstop, every day. Did I say every day enough?
Yeah.
For 7 years. You built your following up to about 25,000 followers. You get up to 3 million impressions over, I don't know if it was a 6-month period or whatever you said, but 3
Yep.
million impressions over whatever period of time is a lot. You created some value, like a value lead magnet, which was
Yep.
a 50-page, hey, here's how to go and, create your own, I don't know if it was brokerage business or investment business, but hey, here's how to transact and here's how I'm doing it. And that created a lot of people who could figure out, all right, based on what Logan just gave me, I'm doing it, but I need a little bit more help. And so for those that were hustlers and could actually get to the finish line with the content that you created, they're reaching out to you to just, I just need a little bit more to get across the
That's right.
finish line. So you built this lead generation tool by creating content and throwing it out there. And this is what's helped you really grow your brokerage business, investing business, just everything in general. And so from there, what you teach in your mastermind course for brokers and agents is, hey, number one is you've got to focus on building a brand, right? You talked about how to do
Yep.
that. You talked about creating content around the avatar, differentiating. It's creating content, put out content that's going to attract people, add value to whoever your target customer is, because they will think of you first when it's time to do business. The second thing you said was going out and actually knowing your market. What are the stats, the tools, the statistics? And you do a really good job of this. I don't think anybody puts out better statistical content than you do on your LinkedIn post.
Thank
It
you.
really goes to show that you know your market really well, because a lot of agents don't, right? They're just a friendly face, and that's kind of it. Three, you said that you're using AI technology to very quickly deliver value. I like that because one of the biggest hurdles, you could say, when it comes to customer retention or just your customer experience roadmap is how quickly from the time somebody gives you money do they get the not only expected thing but the first time value. So there's like a couple different little roadmap pieces here. It's, the first is, okay, I acquired the customer, what's the first time
Yep.
value, what's the recurring value, what's the actual expected value, the thing that they paid for. And the sooner you can get them to experience some kind of value between when they transact and do business with you, where they get that value. And in your case, you're giving them this amazing performance report on their asset that you're leveraging AI to do. That is what's really setting you apart, and just is
Exactly.
being, wow, holy cow,
It's a lot.
that's
It's a
a lot of
lot. Don't
stuff
get me
there.
wrong. It's a lot of stuff there for sure. But I think if you start thinking about it from that perspective, instead of, okay, I got a phone book. It's not a phone book anymore, but I got, my CRM, and I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call and see, hey, XYZ owner, are you interested in selling or listing your property? That's just not going to be successful anymore. I
Yeah.
just don't think it is. Now, there's another whole methodology around making cold calls, right? I mean, you have to build a relationship. And why would somebody send you the T12 and rent roll if they don't know who you are? So maybe that first set of phone calls is to set a meeting to get to know someone. So it's a
Yeah.
little bit more of a longer game too. So that's what we're teaching in the Brokers Mastermind too, is cold calling, man. I love, I think his name is Brandon Miner or Jason Miner. I can't remember, something Miner. He's all over Instagram, and he's got the ad that says, if you're calling somebody, hey, I'm just calling to follow up, and he kind of throws up on the ad. It's great. But he created a company called NEPQ, Neuro Emotional Persuasive Questioning. And he's got a whole sales process that you go around building that relationship, understanding the situation, moving the situation to the problem, going from there. Because here's the thing, as real estate investors and brokers, we are not real estate. We're not problem finders. Sorry, we're not problem solvers. We are problem finders. People don't know that they have problems. And so you have to go find those problems. Then you have to have a solution. Then you have to bake in consequence based on doing nothing versus taking action, right? And so all of that, speed is going to win. So like you mentioned, if I talked to somebody a week ago and they send me some financials and it's 4 weeks before I get anything back to them, man, they've already had so many conversations. Their time is already, their headspace is somewhere else. They're not even thinking about our conversation anymore. But if it's 24 hours later and I've got some output that looks really nice and formatted really well and
Yeah.
looks like I spent 6 hours on financial analysis and I've gotten that back to them in 24 hours, they're going to start thinking, wow, that's the type of service that this person's going to give me. And when people
Yeah.
reach out about my property, if I list with them, that's how they're going to respond to them, right? So I think that's a crucial component of that. And look, there's just not that many resources out there in the brokerage community, especially on the commercial real estate side, outside of like CCIM, that's going to teach you the fundamentals and things like that. I just haven't seen a whole lot of opportunities that people are leveraging the technology and the systems and the processes that I am to be who you truly are. Tim Grover says, in order to get what you really want, you have to first be who you really are. And so many people are trying to be different people. And if you just embrace who you really are and figure out your unique voice, people are going to be gravitated towards that. And I just think that's so important. So anyways, there's the Brokers Mastermind. Very excited about that launch. And I've been doing a 12 weeks to commercial real estate course for free, just kind of as a feeder course, but also just kind of, talking about what's interesting to people. And I'll provide all of this content. I've got all these slides, and then I get on and I'm 40 minutes into the call and I haven't put any slides up. We're just talking about exactly what I just talked about. Hey, Logan,
Yeah.
how did you get 136,000 impressions on your content over the last 7 days? Right. And it's like, well, how did you get this land development deal kind of moving forward? It's just, that's the type of stuff. Cause I think teachers, if you're going to go teach something, you should be actively doing it. Right. I hate that saying of like, teachers are the folks who can't do, right? I think that the right coaches and the right teachers and the right people who are running these types of groups need to be actively involved and engaged in what they are doing on a regular basis. And if so, that's going to show through.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, don't hire a mentor or somebody who's not actually doing it, because the
Yeah.
business changes a lot. Just because they did it in the past doesn't mean they're currently know the way of successfully doing it. Dude, man, I wish we had more time. We're gonna have you back on the show at some point. This has been awesome. For those that want to learn more about you, learn more about your mastermind program, where should they go? Or learn more about FTW
Yeah.
investments?
Absolutely. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me, Logan Freeman, Mr. Kansas City. Just find me on LinkedIn. Every single link is going to be all there. You can check out a lot of the content that I'm posting on a regular basis there. But that's the best place to get a hold of me and learn more about Exchange, FTW, and the Brokers Mastermind that we're getting ready to launch.
Rock on. And hey, if you got value from this episode, show Logan some love, show me some love, like, subscribe, share this with your friends and family. Logan, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Brandon.